My next guest, President Leon Botstein, is a Swiss-American Jewish conductor, scholar, and the president of Bard College. He received PhD from Harvard University in music history and later became the youngest college president in US history at age 23. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with him. Hi, Leon. Thank you so much for being my guest.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I'm just very, very honored to be able to talk to you because to me, you're like a modern Renaissance man. You have so many titles. You're a conductor, you're a scholar, and also the president of Bard College. So first, I wonder, was it a conscious decision for you to choose so many paths at the same time?
Well, it's interesting. First, it was a pleasure to have a conversation with you. We're proud of you as an alumna of the conservatory and the college. And I remember you from the very first semester you were a student, and your talent and intelligence were evident from the start. So we're very proud of you. In answer to your question, I think that most people have careers or lives that they are more in charge of how they take shape than they'd like to admit, especially in music. There is a whole group of people who want to tell you that they would have been Jascha Heifetz or Annie-Sophie Mutter, except something got in the way. Or they are embittered because they wanted to have a career of a certain kind that didn't work that way. They're filled with envy and jealousy. The worst of them become music critics and express their envy and jealousy by writing negatively about other people. But in general, most people, I think it's healthy to, as best one can, assume responsibility for what one does, given the limitations. You know, people get sick, wars happen, pandemics happen, bad things happen. Tragedies happened, unexpected events. In my case, my career is simply the natural result of several things that fit together. They don't look like they fit together to the outsider, but they fit together as far as I'm concerned. So I've been doing the same thing since I was a little boy. And that's number one. Music was somehow my natural language. I was an immigrant to the United States. I spoke no language well. I stuttered. So music was somehow a natural language of expression, whether I fooled around on the piano or studied the violin or listened to music. Music was always, in a way, my first language. And the only language I seem to not to stutter in, if you know what I mean. So that was an essential part of the world of the imagination which I lived, and I was a relatively isolated child, and music that I imagined in my head was a daily source of wonderment and consolation. Second, I come from an immigrant family where I was brought up with a sense of obligation to the country. So we were stateless. So you came from China, but you're a citizen as well of China, and we were citizens of nothing. No country would have us. So by coming to America, my parents and we found a home.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up with the sense that I have an obligation to give back to the country that essentially rescued us.
Mm-hmm.
So the public service part of my job, you know, when you say, well, he's a college president, well, that was an accident, but it's an accident that comes out of the desire to do something more than play music. I didn't want to simply play music, Rome burns, and I'm just playing the violin,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the idea that music is as separate from life,
Mm-hmm.
so I always had in mind, I'm going to do something that's going to better my community, and somehow it'll be connected with music. I didn't know how that was going to work. And the third piece of it, which is the only other piece, is that because I came from a world where memory was so crucial and so fragile. So my father was the only survivor of his family. My mother's family, extended family, parents, uncles, siblings, was maybe a group of 20 people, and 3 survived. Both my parents went to high schools. My mother was one of 3 survivors from her high school. So we grew up in a world where the world from which our parents and one surviving grandparents came was a vanished world, a forgotten world, an invisible world that didn't exist anymore. And as a child, I became very interested in the way that we tell the story of our past,
Mm-hmm.
what we select, what we don't say.
Mm-hmm.
And I was brought up with pictures of people who were dead, whom I would never meet. Albums full of photographs of people who were only talked about or not talked about. And I became very interested in protecting memory from being erased. So as a young child, I became very interested not only in Beethoven and Brahms and in Stravinsky or John Williams. I was interested in the people whose names we don't. I had the instinct that they can't be the only important people who existed. And a lot of music was going on. A lot of film music was being written that wasn't written by John Williams. There must have been music written, symphonies written by people other than Beethoven while he was alive. He can't be the only guy who writes symphonies, right? So who are those people? And the stupid textbooks that we read, are they can't be right to say, oh, they're just terrible. They're terrible. The only, so there is a kind of the way we were brought up being told the history of music. The only violin concertos are Bach, Mozart, Mendelssohn, Tchaikovsky, Brahms, Sibelius. That can't be. I mean, it just can't be. Can't be right. And one Bruch.
Mm-hmm.
So I got curious, and I was a bookworm. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't popular. I wasn't handsome. I wasn't, so I had a lot of time by myself. And New York had a wonderful music library, which was open. And you could go and look at the books, and I became interested. I saw Mozart, and then there were names I didn't know before Mozart, Mercadante, Marschner, Magnard. I said, who are they? Why did somebody publish their music? And so I got interested I went on a crusade as a young person in trying to, especially when you read about a piece of music, and I discovered that we don't tell the truth about our own history of music, and we let a lot of wonderful music disappear. So I was very interested in fighting, taking, you know, victory from the jaws of defeat. I wanted not to allow things to descend into obscurity. And the beautiful riches of our repertoire, most of them go unplayed. So when you look at my life or career, you know, it's a natural to me. You know, I'm a musician. I became interested in scholarship because I'm interested in figuring out things people don't know anything about, you know, adding. And I got a chance to lead an institution. It didn't seem so unusual to me, you know. There are many musicians. George Chadwick was the dean of the New England Conservatory of Music. Peter Menon was head of Juilliard. William Schumann ran Lincoln Center. No, Howard Hanson ran Eastman. I didn't seem so unusual, and seemed perfectly natural. And so I'm very lucky because Bard is an institution where the arts are important. So,
Talking
does that answer the question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that actually really answers a lot of questions, not just about music, but also your ideology. You know, I was wondering, you also, well, as you mentioned, you were born in Switzerland and you came to this country stateless. How do you see the future between nations?
Look, what do I know? Very little. Yeah, but no. So I think I have never been a real fan of the nation.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, we would do well to look at different kinds of arrangements, similar in European history to the Holy Roman Emperor, to confederations. That is to say, I've never liked the overlap of ethnic homogeneity and political structures. I think it is America is in trouble, but in its original formulation, it held out the possibility, which it never realized, but it could realize, of reconciling equality with diversity and a cosmopolitan, a multi-ethnic, multiracial, multi-religious society. You know, I'm not sympathetic in your own country. There's more than one way to be Chinese, right? Right. Only a non-Chinese thinks that Chinese is a single thing, right? That's where stereotypes come in.
Yeah.
I've always believed, both as a musician and as a person, that this is about individuals. In fact, the fact that you're Chinese or hold a Chinese passport tells me very little about you.
Yeah.
Very little. Not a lot. And you have every reason to be angry with me is if I apply an ethnic stereotype to you. You're a young Chinese woman, therefore you must be XYZ, you know, the whole bunch of things.
And
You're
it's
smart.
so funny, as a musician, I think the very first question people ask me, it's always, where are you from? And it's not even about where I lived, it's where I come from. And it's not about my passport even. They really want to know exactly what this is about. And this is, I mean, doesn't really matter when I lived in Europe or in this country.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't say this is a very rude question, but this probably explain how human brain function. They really want to put you in a little box first, and then they can probably try to communicate with you because they have to understand it.
Yeah, and what is ridiculous is that the box they're constructing is they didn't construct themselves. They just borrowed that box. Mm-hmm. They borrowed that box from thoughtless. In European history, for example, anti-Semitism has been a factor, but anti-Semitism is often the application of a stereotype that may or may not have anything to do with the real life of an individual. And so I think we have an obligation, whether it's on gender or race, to it doesn't mean that they're not features, linguistic, for example, features that you share with other people who we call Chinese. You may have a common language with them. The learning of that language, there may be cultural norms that you grew up with that are different from the cultural norms that we grew up with. That's all perfectly possible. But I'm an American, but there are many people who wouldn't look at me and say, that's typically American. They would say, there's nothing American about this guy at all, right? There are many Jews who think I'm not really Jewish because I don't fit their stereotype of being Jewish, and so forth. So, nations that trade on a mythical homogeneity, we're all Frenchmen, we're all Germans, we're all Russians, we're all Hungarians. This is a kind of it's a kind of negative trick. So my hope is for regional two things: devolution, more political control to local small entities, and collaboration between entities. So ideally, this is not practical. The solution for small states is to collaborate. Similar to the EU, but better. For places, very big, powerful nations like China and the United States, it is to open borders, to create more sharing, to stress what we have in common, not what is different.
Exactly.
And music is a platform of non-verbal communication, all kinds of music. We can get along better, you and I, because we're musicians, than I can with someone who looks like me, but has no interest in music, you follow me? We're not one thing. We're our own special connection, conglomeration of qualities. So nations, I'm a patriot to the rule of law, to the Constitution. I'm not a patriot to the flag or to some kind of national pride. I don't cheer in soccer matches for my team, but I celebrate the achievements of individual players.
That's very
and their ability to work together as a team. I also don't like winning. I'm always on the side of the underdog.
Yeah, you are always sort of putting your ideology in reality, and that's why I actually really admire lots of your projects, especially the ones at Bard Prison Initiative. That's something that I think you really probably changed a community. You know, even for me, I remember I was only 18. I participated in one of those concerts, playing music for prisoners there. And, you know, as a foreigner, I was very shocked by the racial discrepancy there. All I saw were Black men. And that actually sort of probably changed my way of seeing my role as a musician. Because at that moment, I realized, wow, what I do actually can be impactful. So I remember specifically, there was this prisoner who raised his hand and asked you, said something like, this is the first time I hear classic music. This is very beautiful. I wonder if there are some ways that my kids can actually hear music like this. And that moment, I was very shocked. And that's why I want to present some free concerts in the future for BPI. And so, so related to how you see your sort of role in society, you want to always help the minority. Maybe you can share about your beliefs on how education can change or maybe help marginalized communities.
No. So let me say that the thing that the Bard Prison Initiative shows in terms of music is that to have a good audience, you don't need an audience that knows anything about music.
Mm-hmm.
I always get annoyed when people say, classical music doesn't mean anything because I don't know anything about it. I say, you don't have to know anything about it. You got to like it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no right way to listen. The second is you can't play always in concert halls. You can't expect people to come to you. You have to go to them.
Yeah.
So, you know, the other thing is that you don't have to give formal concerts. Yes, that's part of what we do. You know, you dress up, you know, in a suit and the appropriate concert clothes and go out and play without saying anything. But what's the point? That's for a certain kind of audience. It makes sense. But the audience is to say hello, come in, take out your violin in front of the audience. You know, show them what's in a violin case, tune the violin, explain how the violin works, play just one movement of a piece and then explain it, play it again. Different kind of use of your musicianship with an audience. To make sure the audience isn't passive. That's why in those concerts we always had members of the audience, inmates in the prison, ask questions, right? And there's no such thing as a bad question.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that where America has fallen down, certainly since the abolition of slavery, is that the real reparations, which was never paid and needs to be paid, is in providing the descendants of enslaved Black Americans real opportunities in education, which they have never had. The schools in which they go are a function of segregated neighborhoods. The investment in the creation of suburbia and the flight of richer populations out of the inner cities has left a very unequal educational system. And part of our job is to render that equal. Growing up in the city of New York, There have been moments of greater and weaker investment in the city school. We have 2 public high schools in the city. We have actually 8 public high schools in 6 cities around the country. These are special kinds of working to serve inner city population, but with a very high quality education. And that simply, there's not enough of that. So music is an enormously important level playing field for children, particularly, all kinds of music. It doesn't have to be classical music. So, I mean, education is a vital instrument of the ability of people to better themselves. And in the past, the Venezuelan El Sistema system has been a good example of the ability to do that, where music is used as an instrument of social advancement.
Thank you. That's very, very meaningful to know. I think most of us musicians, we grew up in a bubble, especially, conservative trained musicians.
Right.
Nowadays, of course, we are more aware of, our roles in society, but I think there's much more we can do, reaching out, not just thinking about individual careers.
Yes. Also, I think that the tragedy is that the musician today plays much better than any of the previous. You play much better than the concertmaster of the best orchestra of Europe 100 years ago. You're a better violinist. You get around the instrument with greater accuracy, beauty of tone, and you're like, if I put a tennis player from 100 years ago on a court with you and you were a tennis player, that person wouldn't hit a ball back, right? It's the same story. Your level of play is much higher than the concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic when Gustav Mahler was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic in 1909. You play much better than he ever, Theodor Spiering, ever played. But the reason is because of recording and the rising standard of the athletic part of it. It's like any sport. You want to get on a team, you have to run faster. You have to hit the ball harder. You have to kick the ball harder, whatever the appropriate thing is, right?
Yeah.
So I remember my violin teacher telling me that when he was a student, in order to graduate, you had to play a selection of the 24 caprices of Paganini. Now to get into the conservatory, you have to play all of them. Right. So the point being that so much more time is now the player fighting the machine.
Yes.
Fighting the machine, because music listeners get most of their music from recorded music. And recorded music, a lot of it is edited. So
it's not reality. Yeah.
It's not reality. I remember when the first recordings came out of the Bach solo sonatas and partitas, long playing records. And as you know, learning them is hard, and and I remember listening with a headset of a recording, and I could tell where it was spliced. I could tell. You couldn't do that in real life. You couldn't make that sound without feeling the physicality of the instrument. It was pieced together. Now, if you look at old videos, you see a lot of players who are great musicians, expressive musicians, but a modern audience will find their technical clarity a little murky.
but much more interesting, much more.
Oh, much more. But you couldn't make a career doing that. You couldn't make a
At
career
least
doing
you
that.
cannot win competitions.
That's right. That's right. So we have created a monstrosity. We've sacrificed a kind of antiseptic attitude to the physical accuracy
Mm-hmm.
and starved the spiritual, what I would call interpretive, the spiritual, the meaningfulness of music making.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lot of people who have spent so much time worrying about, an oboist worrying about getting a clean sound, a clean tone, and a beautiful tone, that they don't worry more about what they're playing or why they're playing it, right? Mm-hmm. And that we have to correct. We have to find a way to correct. And and that's a dilemma which is very hard to figure out how to deal with.
For sure. Would you say this is probably the consequence of the development of technology? Because
yes.
It's not just about music. I think more than ever, especially of course now during pandemic, like we highly rely on technology. Like even
yes,
now.
But for example, it depends what the technology is. The technology is only as good as we make it, right? So this conversation is a tremendous advance. I'm thrilled to see you. I haven't seen you in a couple of years. I remember you so vividly as a student. I look forward to having you as a colleague, teaching at Bart, and I'm inordinately proud of you. And this is much more fun than being on the telephone, right?
Yes.
Now, I would love to be your correspondent. So we lived in the 19th century, you would write me a letter and I'd write you a letter back. That was the height of technology. But in music, the problem has been in the misrepresentation of the experience of music that looks spontaneous but isn't. It is mm-hmm. if, for example,
yes.
you weren't really yourself, you were wearing a mask. That wasn't really your face. Mm-hmm. Or in fact, ISO edit, and you can do that with photography as well. You can make a fake reality. The president made a big deal about the fake news. Well, the one thing I know when I'm on the stage with you, right, is that's the magic of the moment and the community in the audience watching you and interacting with you, and you feel them and you're communicating something to them at that moment, at that time. That's what music can do the same way a conversation does.
Yes, it's authentic.
Right? Yes, in other words, there is it's authentic and it's unique. It can't reproduce. That's why in music there's no repetition. Mm-hmm. You can take the first part of a saraband. The next time you play it is different, even if you actually work very hard to repeat yourself, because mm-hmm. it's now in the sequence of being the second time.
Right.
Both for you and for us. Mm-hmm. Right. What else would you like to know about? For me, at least.
Well, the reason I mentioned technology is because obviously this is a very difficult time for many musicians.
Very.
So the borders closed, all the concerts, obviously, live concerts, they have to be postponed or canceled. So during this time, I see, many of my colleagues or my friends, they are using, technology to create concerts on internet.
Right.
Some of them are really amazing. Some of them you can tell it is a little bit difficult for them to actually put things together. As you can tell, especially when you create maybe duos or chamber music, it's very hard to create that kind of organic interaction through apps. So what do you think, what would be the best way for us to navigate during this time?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let me say, number one, I'm going to be pessimistic for a moment. I think that we face a real problem. It's going to take a long time for this art form to recover. Mm-hmm. In much of the world, the audience that we depended on is the most vulnerable to the disease, mm-hmm. or older, and especially in the United States. And they'll be reluctant to come back and sit close by for 3 hours wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. The economics are bad enough for the art form that social distancing inside halls, which would reduce the density, is going to make the economics worse. The real challenge is not for the solo violin recital or the violin piano recital. It's for a large ensemble. Mm-hmm. Orchestral, jazz orchestra, opera, musical theater, however you want to do it. And singing, which is the heart of all music. Mm-hmm. Choral singing. When will we be able to go back to a church and sing hymns? Mm-hmm. So the road back is not so clear for music. Second of all, in the United States, there's never been public subsidy for it. So the economics, where's the patronage going to be? Who's going to support this?
Right. Oh.
And so number one, I think that I also think, given the audio acoustics, that there is no technological surrogate for what we do. Mm-hmm. I've never believed that you could record a Mahler symphony or a Wagner opera or Puccini opera. They're just documents.
Mm-hmm. I see. Mm-hmm.
They're documents. So you have on your wall reproductions of art, right? Mm-hmm. Those are reproductions of art. And that's what they are. They're reproductions of art, but they're not the artwork. It's great to have on YouTube, Jascha Heifetz playing the Bruch Scottish Fantasy. It's great, mm-hmm. right? And but it's a document. It's like a picture of St. Peter's Basilica in a book on Rome. Mm-hmm. I like it. It's great. I can blow it up. That's high fidelity. I can blow it up, right? I can look at it very carefully. That's very different from being in St. Peter's Basilica. Mm-hmm. It's different from standing in Bernini's architecture. I'd rather hear you play the Bach solo sonatas live. I'd rather hear you do that than listen to a recording of, Nathan Milstein. Because it isn't the same, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to find a way back into live performance. We're going to do it out of doors here at Bard, mm-hmm. in socially distant with smaller groups. But eventually we're going to have to solve the problem of how you're going to play the Rite of Spring live. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're going to have a much harder role returning to mm-hmm. this life than other art forms mm-hmm. and other walks of life. Mm-hmm. We're a communal one, gathering communities in a public culture. That's who we do. That's what we do. Being close together. We're physical. when you play a concerto, and you do it with a conductor, let's say with myself,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be socially distant from you. We've been communicating. I'm going to give you a hug, right? Right? The dance is also highly challenged by this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Sound and movement. So there's no technological exit.
Mm-hmm.
The magic we have is technology is great, but it's not going to replace it. What we do, it's much harder than in other fields.
I'm just really concerned that it doesn't matter, artistically speaking, if it's replaceable or not, but the market is changing because it seems like that's the only way to produce performances. Therefore, I am a little bit concerned whether or not the future, everything will be online.
No, definitely not. No, I don't think so, because it's not worthwhile. We just produced, for example, from our past, videos of opera productions that were done in the Bard Music Festivals. And they're rare operas, so they're operas you can't see anywhere else. You can't go to a performance anyplace. We've revived these rare operas. First of all, they're nice videos, but they're dependent on a live performance, number one. The other thing is that I don't think this will be a function of being replaced by technology. The question is, we'll have to change the repertory.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to find a way to bring a younger audience in. We'll have to rebuild. This is a great opportunity to break bad traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many bad traditions. And the amount of routine mediocrity
Mm-hmm.
that we produce. And we have to find a program in a way that relates to our audience as opposed to a mythical international audience. So you travel and you're playing and you play in Detroit, and then you play in Hong Kong, then you play in Beijing, then you play in Tokyo, then you play in Singapore, then you play in Paris, and you're playing the same thing. You could be anywhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's not making it. But imagine what will happen is music will become increasingly local. People will travel less. And you will become familiar as a violinist to the community you choose to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll look forward to your series of concerts. And you'll get to talk to the audience, and you'll meet with them. And you'll socialize and interact with them. You won't be flying in and flying out. We have to rethink how we do this.
Thank you. This is actually very, very good to know. And I agree with you, because I think even for music industry, there's this sort of a model. It's related to everything goes to top. So there are some ensembles or some performers,
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yeah. We're not Hollywood.
Yeah.
This is not Hollywood. We're not about a couple of rock stars and famous Hollywood, and the rest is no one's ever heard. That's not our business.
Yeah.
Any more than religion is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. The priest of my church or the pastor of my church, that's why I'm not interested in televangelists. There's only one spokesman for my religion? No. There's only one great surgeon? There's only one great painter? No. You as a performer require me as a listener. And I can't be just a generic listener, a number. The big difference is I can move you better if I know who you are and the world you inhabit. If you have someone in your family die and you want to be consoled by your minister, you don't import the minister from the Bureau of Famous Ministers. Call a minister agency. Send me the most popular high-priced minister I can find.
Yeah, you're right. I think this is time for us to, break the tradition. Hopefully we can also attract some more younger generations.
Oh, yes. And also, I worry about attracting people to learn the instrument. You spent a lot of time practicing the violin, right? You didn't fall out of bed and play, a D flat major scale with arpeggios and octaves without practicing, right? It just didn't happen, right? Okay. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. If there's no public and no enthusiasm, who's going to take our place? Who's going to learn? Who's going to go to conservatory?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why I think the program at Bard is very significant. And
Totally.
Most of my classmates, most of them, they're in completely different fields. Obviously, they still play music, but they sort of kind of probably reach out to their friends or their communities in different, hopefully by educating younger generation of having both, not just music and having some other interest, we can bring a different.
And maybe we can create a new class of amateurs that are a higher level than we normally think are amateurs.
Definitely.
Why can't you play in a string ensemble where, 4 of the players are doctors and engineers we went to school with?
Mm-hmm. That's really beautiful. I wonder that I wonder if you can share some of your all-time favorite, compositions or books or, films, anything that really touch you.
Well, I usually think that my favorite pieces are the pieces that I'm working on, right? So that I have to perform. We're about to start open air concerts. We have 5 concerts, and each of the 5 concerts ends with a major work by Beethoven, sort of celebrate his birthday.
Yeah.
But the other 60% of the repertoire will be works by 12 Black composers from European and American history. So it includes Julia Perry, William Grant Still, Duke Ellington, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, the Chevalier de Saint Georges, a whole group of Florence Price.
Mm-hmm.
And so the things that are my favorites are things that I have to work on. So I'm looking at Duke Ellington's Harlem. I'm looking at Beethoven, the 4th Symphony,
Mm-hmm.
which I particularly like, and I'll do as well as the 3 other Beethoven symphonies we're going to do. On my mind is also once the pandemic is over, we had a big project at Bard doing a production of Salome, Strauss.
Oh, wow.
And so that was great. We were in the midst of rehearsal when the pandemic struck. I'm looking forward to that. We're also doing Kyle Gann has done a new edition of a very great American 19th century symphony by Bristow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking forward to that. And we have a couple of recording projects. with tone that. So I usually like what I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And what I agreed to write a book on Gustav Mahler for Yale University Press. So I'm reading a lot of Mahler stuff, and I'm finding it very interesting. So I don't. You don't either. If I told you what's your favorite piece of music, you would you'd be uncertain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there are things you like to play, but probably you like to play that which you're going to play.
That's true.
A teacher once explained it to me. He said, "Let's imagine you're a young person. You are a young person, and you have a social life, and you're dating one person. The worst thing you can do is to date that person and think about another person you would prefer to be dating, right? So the idea that I have to go to a rehearsal conducting a Schumann symphony and thinking, oh, if this were only a Mendelssohn or a Tchaikovsky symphony, I would prefer to do the Pathétique. Well, that's ridiculous. You're in bad faith with the thing that's right in front of you. So you have to, you actually have to, your favorite has to be that which you're attempting to put on the stage. Yes.
Okay. So, and can you also share some of your, or maybe you have secrets of bringing art and music to, wider, not just audience, but yeah.
Not only secrets. I think the thing that is never to be afraid. All of us have given bad performances. All of us have made mistakes. And not to worry about making enemies and friends. To have the courage of an inner conviction. Someone said to me that there's no performer or composer who's ever made a real impact in our field who hasn't gotten bad reviews,
mm-hmm.
who's had enemies, wrongly or rightly. And you have to love what you do and believe in it. And it doesn't mean that you need to be attuned to advice, or you need to be attuned, you'll make miscalculations, you know what I mean?
Right. I guess my question is more geared towards how you reach out to maybe not necessarily like music critique, but not necessarily artistic speaking, but just socially speaking, or outside of
musical. Yeah, I think I simply stripping it of any kind of religious piety. You know what I mean? It's a natural form of human expression. To be relaxed about it, not devoted to it, but relaxed about its. You don't want to communicate to other people that you're special, you're a kind of priest of some cult, mm-hmm. that you have to learn for years in a monastery to figure out, the truth. Mm-hmm. Making the other people feel inferior, to bring them in, to give them a sense that it's part of their lives.
Thank you. That's because I think all of us, we just very admire your capacity. You create so many so many projects. It's insane. Yeah.
Look, the one way to avoid being depressed is to be active.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So take on things, be ambitious, take on things. The worst that can happen is you fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I am so proud of you, and I can't wait till we see each other in person.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, if you have one, just answer one question.
Sure.
You lived a really colorful and rich life. Now, what would you say is the meaning of
Oh, I have no idea.
No,
I have no idea. Age is a matter of attitude, and not of. I know people are old in their 20s, and I know people are young in their 70s. So, a friend of mine once asked me, what do I think about the big questions? And I was very embarrassed, and I said, I was in Israel conducting, and I was staying in the same hotel with a friend of mine he was a professor at Columbia University, not a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a nice weather, and I was sitting around on the veranda having a cup of tea, and he sat next to me, and he said, because you're in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is kind of holy land, people get kind of big ideas, and I've been there every week, not every month, as music director there, and he asked me, so what do you think, look out on the old city of Jerusalem, and what do you think about meaning of life and death? And I said, I'm a little tone deaf on these big questions. I don't, I try to live in a way that every day I can go to bed with honor, in a way that I have somehow made some small contribution. I don't believe that I have a right to breathe the air and take the space unless I make some kind of contribution to the well-being. It can be in a musical way. It can be that, we just released a recording that has two very rare works on it, three. Concerto Grosso by Dmitri Mitropoulos, the great conductor, and a song cycle by the Swiss composer Ottmar Schoeck, a great piece. And so when that came out, I felt, I've added to the possibility that someone's life would be enriched by access to these pieces. I can feel good that, we were able to give someone a scholarship. Mm-hmm. That I was able to console someone whose mother died, a colleague of mine, mother died. So at the end of the day, life gains meaning by, I think, the accumulation of very small grains of things that justify one's existence. And one makes mistakes, and there are things one is sorry for, but the only way one can compensate for them is to balance them out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
And stay well.
You too. Stay well.
Okay.
And hopefully
I'll see you soon. We'll see each other soon. Okay.
Thank you so much, Leon. Bye.
Thank you, Luosha. Bye-bye.